Welcome back to Gruber Motor Company and the Tesla Roadster podcast that we do every Wednesday. And I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning and welcome to everybody.
So the picture behind us is a Tesla Roadster. Do we have a social media issue?
Yeah, we went live on Power Services on accident.
Okay.
Well, on Instagram.
So we're bringing our Instagram live. And while we're doing that,
Yeah, you go ahead and keep
is this an Earth type image or is this a Mars type image like we had yesterday?
You know, the prompt on this one was calling for sand dunes and a chrome roadster, which I think it nailed pretty well. Sometimes you do chrome and it ends up being silver.
Sure.
But as usual, it's a stunning image, well executed, lighting is superb, but there are some design details that are a bit off. And, why don't we leave it again to the Roadster visitors to point out the flaws in this particular Tesla Roadster. It's supposed to be a 2008 Tesla Roadster, and feel free to chime in and tell us what you see that may be inappropriate on this rendering of a AI Roadster. If you move your head a little bit, Mark, we can see there you go.
There we go.
There's the first problem. I won't give them any clues. Thank you. Instagram just joined us. Welcome. We've got a full show today. We've got some people that are going to be joining us from various parts of the world that have Roadsters. And the first thing that we could start with is on the Roadster matchmaking site.
Yeah.
We have a section there where it talks about the headlights and have they been upgraded, in other words, from the standard incandescent. And there, it occurred to us there were actually three different levels of upgrade for the Tesla Roadster. There was the xenon bulbs first, then there was the HID, and then the LEDs came later. The selection that we have here, that category, actually encompasses all three of those, although it's called, I think, LED headlight upgrade.
Right.
Anything is better than an incandescent bulb, so, those other types of bulbs are improvements, so we'll let them be synonymous.
Yeah, and I think I've done HID and LED on different cars, and they're just about the same thing. It's all about the brightness of the headlight once you're all done.
And it looks like George has joined us. He's the one with the moniker Watch Rich Rebuilds channel. Always gets a little plug for the Rich Rebuilds organization. He says, "Good morning, guys. Thank you guys for the quick email response. It turns out one of our vendors was watching the audience and contacted George about that Fine tool, thinking perhaps that he was with
Right.
Rich Rebuilds organization. And if you're out there watching Doug, it was actually Doug with Fine Tools that was kind enough to come out, visit us, show us how this tool works, and we love it. We're using it on Model S batteries now. But if you're interested in some contact information, feel free to reach out to me, and I think that Rich's organization will be interested in getting some information about this tool.
Yeah, welcome, George, and good to see you this morning. Trucker Alistair has also joined us on YouTube. Welcome back, Trucker. He says, "Good morning, guys. Nice to see you again. A question. Is the hybrid Lotus a right-hand drive or a left-hand drive?"
It is a right-hand drive, George. Or I'm sorry, Trucker Alistair. There's one picture there where they show the interior.
Yeah.
And it shows it as a right-hand drive car. Those seats look pretty cool, too. They're a little bit more plush than what we see in a Roadster typically. But of course, it was a $28 million car.
Sure.
So they probably could spend a little bit more on the interior on that car.
Well, I'm going to say a more plush than Roadster seat isn't saying a whole lot.
Yeah, that's true. And they quickly give out, too. They're pretty thin with the padding. Speaking of that, we should probably talk about, oops, I'm getting away from my microphone, and let me increase this. We had a customer ask about the batteries in this hybrid Lotus. And it's a fair question. It didn't occur to us that, there was really no parameter that disclosed battery health. Like in a Roadster, you have the calculated amp hour capacity, which is a pretty good barometer where your battery's at. This particular car did not have that. So we got a hold of the owner or the seller, and he said that personally, I would plan to budget on refurbishing a battery pack if you want to drive it. So we're not even sure at this point whether the car is drivable with the existing battery pack.
Right.
He said that, and let me paraphrase here, the original engineers who built the 414E think that, hang on a second.
Yeah, and now the 414E, as you're resizing that, I read through that email, and he says that it actually has 3 battery packs,
Right.
which is really cool. I mean, I'm glad that they thought enough to say, yeah, you're not going to have just one. We're going to make sure you have at least a couple of spares.
Right. So he suggests, keep the pack in the car intact, especially if it's a collectible car
Yep.
and you're not going to drive it. The 2 other packs can certainly be certified and retested, but he said plan on spending about $80,000 to $100,000 for a replacement battery pack, and if you're planning on driving the car, and he's more than willing to deduct that amount from the eventual sale price.
Which I thought was actually pretty cool for them.
Yep. Yep. So that's kind of an update on that Lotus. We don't have any bids yet, but we have some interested parties. So, and typically, again, as a dating service, we turn sellers over to buyers, and they begin the negotiation from there.
Yep. Now on the you had just talked about the bulb updates and the LID, HID, and LED, and other bulbs, and I think we're going to be talking about the battery packs and resistive cells soon as well, too. Correct?
We are, yeah, and we've got some pictures we can pop up there. I guess we could break into that. We don't have a lot of questions right now.
Sure.
There was an event that occurred actually a couple of weeks ago. We got a call from a Florida customer with a Fusion Red Tesla Roadster. And she was saying, my range is beginning to decline about 12 or 13 miles every time I charge. And of course, to us, that's an immediate tip off. My God, you've got a resistive cell.
Right.
And it's not going to stop. It's going to continue to drain a brick. And what's actually happening inside the car is there is one cell out of 6,831 in a brick, one out of 99 bricks, one cell out of 69 in a brick, all connected in parallel, that has gone rogue. It's gone resistive. And instead of contributing, it's actually becoming parasitic, and it's draining the rest of the 68 cells in that brick. Well, the battery management system in a Tesla Roadster recognizes this.
Right.
And it doesn't like it at all because it's sensing a cell that, if charged, could go thermal.
Right.
So what it does is it begins limiting the charge based on what it's perceiving as a delta or a voltage change between bricks. There's a brick average, and then there's this particular brick which is trying to keep this resistive cell alive by injecting voltage into the resistive cell instead of contributing to the car,
Okay.
or doing both. So as this is occurring, the BMS begins to scale back its ability to charge. Now, this is one for the books. We've never seen one that is dropping this rapidly. Typically, a resistive cell will result in maybe a mile per week, a couple miles per month, but nothing this drastic. It's
Right.
usually a gradual process. This one just seemed to flip a switch and say, okay, I'm going from a contributor to a parasite overnight, and I'm going to drain as much as I can. So at this point in time, our suggestion to Roadster owners is there is no point in sending it to a Tesla service center at this point, and I'm sure that Tesla will agree with this because their solution is replacing a battery pack.
Right.
They can't open a battery pack at the service center to resolve something like this. And time is not on anyone's side because as this car is dropping, and remember 12 to 13 miles per charge means that this thing's going to be bricked in a couple of weeks. So our suggestion at this point is let's start getting a transporter lined up because the only fix for this is a trip to a service center like ours where we can open the pack, find that resistive cell, take it out of circuit, and then the battery ends up working just fine again. Well, that's exactly what happened. It took us about 3 days or so to line up a transporter. By this time, the range on the car was down to 50 miles. Now, you have to remember, you have an owner here that is highly concerned about what's going on with their car because they're basically watching it die before their very eyes. By the time we got it on a transporter, it was down to 30 miles, and we suggested don't worry about pulling a service plug. That doesn't do a thing, and we'll talk about that in a second. And at this point, make sure that you're still able to drive it onto the transporter because that reduces the cost. And we fully expect that 30-mile Roadster that was driven onto the transporter to be completely dead by the time it gets to Phoenix 5 days later. So 5 days later, sure enough, it shows up, and we had to use a forklift to get it off of the transporter because the rear wheels were locked, and it was dead. It wouldn't drive anymore. The instant we got it into the service center, we put it on life support. And what that does is you want to make sure that that one brick out of 99 that has a resistive cell, those cells, those other 68 good cells, don't spend too much time below 2 volts DC. If that happens, then you end up with a chemical reaction that begins to affect and destroy the other 68 cells in that brick. And if you end up with a compromised or dead brick, your only solution then becomes a sheet replacement. And in this day and age, Tesla Roadster sheets are in very short supply. We have some, but it used to be that we could buy donor cars at the auctions, probably a dozen per year.
Right.
Nowadays, if you see 1 or 2 Roadsters per year selling at any of the auctions, that's a lot because people are snapping them up, even if they're bricked.
Yeah, and if you do see them at the auction, there's going to be a much higher price on those Roadsters as well because there are a lot of people that are trying to buy them.
Tell me about it. We're paying almost 3 times what we used to pay for parts Roadsters, So anyway, the good news is the car gets here. We put it on life support. It's then waiting for a trip onto a lift for surgery. Surgery meaning that we drop a 1,000-pound battery pack. We open it up. We pull out the sheet that is having the problem. And we can throw up some of the images here, Jesse. If you would pop up an image called Brick Roadster-1. Or, I'm sorry, Brick Roadster-0. Let's show the diagnostic process. And the reason I want to spend some time with this, there's an important message here about the service plug. Here's one of our Roadster engineers with a laptop, and what he's doing is confirming which brick and which sheet is having the problem. And you can't see it quite from here, but the car at this point is on dollies because the rear wheels are locked. Within a couple of days, this car went up on a lift, and if we can show up Roadster Brick-1, we're going to see what the engineer is seeing. And I'll explain this. You see all those blue lines? There are 99 of them. And it's showing a voltage level on 98 of those bricks at 4.0 volts. One of them is all the way down below 2 volts. And you can count which sheet it's in by starting on the left there. So you've got sheet 1, 2, and then 3 is the one that's showing brick number 9 below 2 volts. Now, the car had been transported about 5 days or so. It probably spent a day, maybe 2, below 2 volts, which is not a great concern. It's when weeks go by and you've got something below 2 volts, you have a brick below 2 volts, that the other cells begin to do the death march.
Sure, right. So this particular graph, and I've seen this before. I've looked at the log at the puppy suite that we're using for this, and that just took out about 99% of your work in finding the right cell.
Precisely. And then if you look down to the lower left corner there, just below the blue lines, it says min and max. It's telling us that the minimum brick voltage is 0.732 volts, so it's even under 1 volt at this point, and the maximum is an average of 3.9 something. I can't quite see it here, 3.980, which is where they should be. So from here, let's pop up, let's see. Let's pop up Brick Roadster-2. So we get this up on the lift. We find the resistive cell, which is what we've gotten very good at doing. And all it takes is one. Remember, out of almost 7,000 cells, just this one cell. And all we have to do at this point, once it's identified, is 2 little fusible link wires on both sides of the cell get snipped, and that cell now is out of circuit. 2 things happen. we put a meter on that cell that we just snipped. And if we got the right one, we watch it drop like a rock.
Sure.
Because it's no longer, maintaining a state of charge. It's actually feeding on itself basically as
Right,
well because it's
right.
resistive. And the rest of the cells in that brick, the voltage starts rising because it's no longer trying to feed that parasitic cell.
And so the voltage is stabilizing and actually going up on some of those cells then.
Precisely. The next thing we do is we take that brick that is now, or that had been compromised, that's starting to come up in voltage, and we trickle that back to the same level as the other bricks in the car.
Okay.
Now that gives us an assurance that we're going to have a balanced pack when we put it back up in the car and we get maximum range, because the BMS again is looking for that slight delta in voltage between bricks.
Right.
And if we can erase that, now you've got a perfectly balanced pack, the BMS is happy, and you're going to see maximum range. Well, this one surprised us. This is a legacy battery pack. It ended up charging to 183 miles in standard mode range, which is about 80-85% charge. This is equivalent to one of the to a new legacy battery pack. Normally, the Roadsters we see are nowhere near the 180s in terms of charge in standard mode. If we're seeing 150, that's good,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. You see 150 to 160, and you're thrilled when you come to us with a report that says you have 160 miles.
So let's pop up image number 3, Brick Roadster -3, and now we're going to look at the calculated amp hour capacity on this battery pack to confirm that this high mileage that we're seeing here is not just an aberration or a miscalculation based on the fact that the pack was out of the car and all that. And what we're going to see here is a CAC that looks very healthy. -3.
Sorry, we're having echoing issues. Give me 1 second.
Okay. There we go. 153.63. Again, new packs were around 157 or so. So this is quite remarkable. The CAC ranges that we're seeing on Roadsters in our service center right now, the lowest one right now is one at 105.63. I'm test driving that one this week, actually. It's still holding and maintaining. It's only charging to 126 miles range in standard mode. And then the highest one is, of course, this one. And they're usually in between. 140 is okay. 150 is phenomenal. And
Right.
even 130 is still a functioning Roadster, CAC values.
Yeah, that 153 is about as high as I've ever seen get reported. And I was mentioning to you ahead of time. I assume, because I sit in the meetings on a we meet 3 times a week. I hear all the terminology. I'm kind of familiar with the jargon, and then I realize, what does it mean for a battery cell to go resistive? Because I'm not a guy that has the engineering experience like the team over at Gruber Motors does. I help to lead some of the engineers. We've done some really cool things, but I have to give credit and kudos to them more than any background that I have. So I went ahead and Google and Chat GPT and the OpenAI stuff, and here's what I found. And this is the I want to talk to my wife type of conversation.
Okay, all right.
A resistive battery cell is kind of like a light bulb, an older incandescent light bulb. See, an incandescent light bulb is simply a filament, and that filament itself is a resistor. As you run electricity through the filament gets hot, eventually to the point that it starts to glow. Has its particular yellow type of glow, and it's putting out light as well as heat. So when a battery becomes resistive, it's kind of the same type of thing. As a battery charges and discharges over time, there are chemical reactions that are occurring on the anode, which is I believe it's the positive.
The negative.
The negative
And the
end.
cathode is positive.
The cathode, which is the positive end, and the electrolyte, which helps to transfer electricity from one end to the other end of the battery.
You've got electrons moving all around, back
Yeah.
and forth. Yeah.
And so over time, the chemical properties of this electrolyte change. Basically, the parts of the electrolyte that are conductive end up either attaching to the anode or attaching to the cathode, and essentially you end up with less electrolyte. On a lead acid battery, I thought it was completely fascinating. You have your sulfuric acid and you have lead. If that battery discharges all the way to 0.00 volts, that sulfuric acid turns into distilled water.
Really?
I
Okay.
did. That was kind of the cool thing that I thought. So over time, these batteries will have permanent changes in their chemistry, and essentially, there's less conductive material in the electrolyte over time as the battery ages.
Hmm.
That's what causes the battery's resistance to go up. It's like trying to force water through a smaller garden hose.
Hmm.
Eventually, a battery will reach a tipping point where it's no longer able to conduct and store electricity, and it instead becomes a resistor, which means that it's asking for electricity to try to maintain some sort of minimum charge. But while it asks for that, it's dissipating all of the energy that it gets, plus a little usually, in the form of heat.
Hmm.
And that's why when you mentioned a battery, the resistive cell, this is why the battery management system always only charges to the lowest brick level, because that resistive cell is getting hot. If the battery management system tries to charge the entire battery to the best brick, that resistive cell will get so hot that it'll go into thermal runaway, and it'll cause the entire battery to go up in flames.
Hmm.
So when a brick gets below 2 volts, and especially when we're talking about the 1.5 version batteries, I believe those cells are only 2.3 volt cells.
2.2 amp hour. They were 4-volt cells.
4-volt cells. Okay, so 2.2 amp hour. Once a cell gets below 2 volts, this chemical process that we're talking about, the chemical reaction, it speeds up exponentially. And so that's why when one cell goes rogue and becomes resistive, and it's drawing electricity from the entire brick, pretty soon all of the other cells in that brick get below 2 volts. They start undergoing the same process that one resistive cell, the aberration as it were, has already undergone. And pretty soon you lose all of the cells in that brick, and it's actually trying to drain from other bricks in that particular battery sheet. So that to me helped me to understand a little bit better what's going on and what it is that's making a cell resistive. And these cells are anomalies, right?
They are. These are aberrations. The end of life symptoms for these multi-cell lithium-ion battery packs has not yet been completely identified, except for that one anomaly that we had with the 2016 packs, where it looks like the cell have an impedance problem after only 7 or 8 years.
Right. And I took a little bit of time to go down the impedance versus resistance. And they're very similar, and in fact, in a lot of measurements, impedance is resistance.
Mm-hmm.
But impedance is more than just resistance. These battery packs that had impedance issues, they would charge up and they would look normal. But when you tried to apply a discharge to them, the batteries would immediately drop voltage. They weren't really holding a charge. They were simply reporting to the battery management system that they had a charge, when in fact their charge was actually pretty low.
And the firmware calls that 100% throttle call, which is the depressing of the accelerator pedal.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And on impedance, that is the kind of the telltale sign. When you put a sudden load onto a battery that has high impedance, that battery that looks normal otherwise suddenly goes dead.
It can't deliver the current that's necessary.
Yeah, it's almost like it's lying to the battery.
So one of our, we got a lot of questions to get through. We'll get to those in a second. But one of our viewers yesterday actually gave us a compliment. He said, you guys remind me of the emerging Tappet brothers, or the Click and Clack.
Yes, Click and Clack on NPR.
So I did a little bit of research. I used to listen to those guys, 20, 30 years ago. I think they've been around forever, it seems like. But, interesting stuff. It was a lot, all ice. Carburation and gear ratios and horsepower curves and all of that, and I thought that was pretty flattering. So I did a little bit of research to find out what these guys are doing. It turns out that they are on 600 syndicated radio stations, NPR being one of them. and they have over 3 million viewers. So we were kind of joking this morning what kind of changes we would have to make here if we had that kind of visibility. And the first thing that came up, of course, Pete, we got to spend more money. We need a bigger studio. We need more money for this. We need more money for that, right? But yeah, it's if we are the click and clack in the EV world, that would be quite flattering. I think.
That would be very flattering. I do also think that the other thing Jesse mentioned, in addition to spending more money, is he said, you will have so much money coming in from all the sponsorships and everything that you'll have the money to spend.
Or my favorite one I've heard for 40 years now from employees is, well, Pete, you have to spend money to make money. That was always a justification for a big expenditure.
Yes.
All right, lots of questions here. YouTube, George from Watch Rich Rebuilds channel. Did you guys get my small gift about the Elon Bitcoin bank deal? LOL.
I have not seen that gift come in yet. Have you seen that
we
come
have
to you
not.
yet?
No. George, try again, and if you have some Bitcoin you want to send our way, or does this have to do with the Elon lookalike that has been contacting me about giving him some money?
I'm wondering if that's what
That
it is.
could be.
George was going to send us an actual package, if I remember right, in a small gift.
Oh, okay. Well,
So I haven't seen it yet, George, but when we get it, we will make sure that we display it up here for our podcast.
Trucker Alistair says, and from YouTube, he's talking about the Lotus 414E, the one of car. He said, nice. If it wasn't so expensive, I'd get it. I love my home country cars. Yeah, that is totally UK, isn't it? Lotus.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
Right-hand drive. I mean, it doesn't, and copper color. It doesn't get any better or more UK than that, does it?
It is really a beautiful car.
Mm-hmm.
Lightning Rod from YouTube says, hello from Thunder Bay, Canada, now with less fire. Lightning Rod, I didn't totally catch yesterday when you came on and said made the reference to the fire and smoke, and then saw late in the afternoon that, my goodness, the whole eastern seaboard of the United States is covered with smoke from all these fires up in Canada.
Yeah.
My thoughts and prayers go out to the people in Canada. I'm glad to hear that you're safe and have less fire.
And it used to be we thought only California suffered from that, but
last year I had a trip. My family lives in Alaska, and my dad had passed away a couple of years ago and left me his pickup truck. And my son and I made a road trip of it to bring the pickup truck down the Alcanna Highway through Alaska and British Columbia. And they had the same thing going on in Canada, in southern British Columbia last year. There were a lot of forest fires going on. In fact, we had to change our route because one of the routes, the one that we wanted to take, was closed. We had smoke from Prince George, British Columbia, about 400 miles north of the U.S.-Canada border, all the way down to Carson City, Nevada.
wow. Whoa, that's okay.
That was little over 2 days worth of driving, 600 miles a day plus, and we had forest fire smoke that we were dealing with. I've never seen anything like that in my life.
Amazing.
It was amazing.
So Trucker Alistair has a great question on YouTube, and he's talking about the resistive cell issue that we spoke about with that Tesla Roadster about 5 minutes ago or so. He said, could there be more than one resistive cell? When a Roadster like this is compromised and gets bricked, and it all starts with one resistive cell, by the way,
Right.
if it's a resistive cell problem. If we catch it in time, that answer is no. There won't be another resistive cell because there are 6,830 of them that did not go resistive. It was just that one.
Right.
If, however, that car doesn't get immediate triage or care, goes to the emergency room quickly, then yes, there could be other resistive cells. And we have seen, and it's typically in the brick that the original resistive cell was in. If that brick spends time below 2 volts, then other cells get compromised. The original Tesla Roadster design engineers that worked on the ESS battery pack, the consensus is that you can't snip more than 4 cells out of 69.
Right.
And that has been a strategy that we have remained within, although it's rare that we have another resistive cell because we tend to get to them very quickly these days. But as an experiment a few years ago, we had a test mule car,
Right.
and at that time Tesla was not yet making battery packs, and we knew that unless that happened, owners were going to want to continue to drive their car, and if they had battery pack problems, we had a test mule that we cut more than 4 cells in these bricks. We had one that had as many as 17 cut.
That's what I thought. You
Yeah.
had 17 in one particular brick.
And we were expecting all kinds of performance issues, either blown fuses because the amperage increased, performance issues, anemic performance, any of that. And you know what? With that test mule that we had, we found that it operated like a normal Roadster. So at this point, for us, 17 cells is the limit that we found to be the case.
Which to me is that's just stunning because you've taken
Well, it's 17 out of 69. So if
Yeah.
you do the math, you can do the percentage.
I mean, you've
of
taken
cells that you've
roughly a
lost.
quarter of your cells out of your battery, and I mean, if you take an 18 amp hour 12 volt battery and try to pair it up with a 12 amp hour 12 volt battery, you're gonna have problems, and that's essentially the kind of thing that you ended up doing in experiment form.
So the simple answer to that, Trucker, is that we did not find any additional resistive cells, and the charge level and the CAC on that Roadster attests to the fact that there are no remaining problems in that car. But when it does occur, we're able to snip those out as well, and we limit it. If we were to do it, we would limit it to 4 cells per brick.
Yes. George has another question for us. He says, would you guys recommend unplugging the main battery safety loop on a Generation 1 Model S or X, or in fact, for any model, for winter garage storage? Would that help the life of the main battery?
I think that kills the DC to DC converter that charges and keeps the 12-volt battery alive, because there's constant charging for that.
Right, right.
So you would have to plan on having a dead 12-volt battery at the end of that season.
Unless you went and removed the negative terminal off the 12-volt battery or something like that as well.
Right, right.
Okay. Okay, yeah. And otherwise, I mean, we've had Model S's sitting in our lot for 2+ years.
Yeah.
Out in the weather in the lot, and we bring it in because it had a drive unit issue. It was one that we had purchased from Copart from auction, and the battery was in good condition. So
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Just this week, actually, they brought Tesla Model S VIN number 69 back into the shop.
right,
The battery on that had begun. No, the drivetrain had a problem, and we noticed that over a year ago. It sat, and when a Model S sits, any of the later non-Roadster Teslas, by the way, have protection circuitry. There are contactors that open up, and you can't kill the battery pack by not charging it.
right.
This particular car charged at 250 miles. It was an 85, which is remarkable. It's better than some of our other 85s. And that's after sitting for a year without any attention, without any charge.
That is simply amazing. The 2012 85, the P85 that I had driven for so long, I think it was charging to 210, maybe 208, something like that, on its battery, and it was getting up there in miles. It had just turned over 100,000 miles recently.
Right.
But so 255 is amazing, and that was, you said, VIN number 69, so that's obviously a 2012 Model S.
2012 totally. It's a signature car. And the fact that we are able to pick these up at auction is just remarkable, but it speaks to the fact that they're not collectible yet.
Right.
Eventually, I think all of the Teslas, the early, especially the signature cars, will be collectible. I doubt that the Model S's will be, because we've got hundreds of thousands of them in circulation, and it's all about rarity. But a special pedigree like a signature, car would definitely go into the collectible status.
Well, we've got that Signature 3, or I'm sorry, Founders Series.
Yeah.
VIN number 3 that's being sold in conjunction with Founders Series number 3 of the Roadsters.
Right. Right.
And that's the kind of uniqueness that you look for when you're buying a car for a collectible.
And that will attract an early investor that is recognizes that these cars are going to be very valuable someday.
By all means, by all means.
Is this where we go into Chinese roadsters? Valuable cars, rarity? Probably.
I think
No
so.
one's
I
asked
think
yet,
so.
but yeah, all right. Let's do a quick update. I spoke with the sellers yesterday, actually. The cars right now are being readied for cargo on a ship to go to Dubai. They will probably leave the port in China this week, definitely by the end of the week, and end up in Dubai. It will be much easier for any prospective bidders to go look at the cars once they're in this free zone in Dubai. And for those of you interested in going and visiting the cars, doing a look-see, by next week, no, actually, it's going to take 18 to 20 days, they said,
Right.
on the water before they land in Dubai. All right, so figure the end of this month, they should be available.
So come the end of June. You know, the one thing I have to say I'm a little surprised with, I haven't heard anything from the guys in social media about traveling to Dubai yet.
That's true, yeah. Although now we've given them that idea, they're
Yeah, I
perking
know.
up. Look at this. You got to spend money to make money, Pete, right?
So, Niles has joined us this morning from the Bion Danish Genome Institute, and welcome back. Good morning.
Yes, morning, Niles.
He asks, do most Tesla owners know about your services? If not, might Tesla be interested in putting you into their support options and notifying their service stations?
You know, we are in communication with Tesla all the time, actually. And many of the service centers we collaborate with. Just this morning, for example, we send out a tech tip, and we do that regularly, about every couple, 3 months or so. And the tech tip had to do with the fact, how do you handle a resistive cell Roadster? Again, there's nothing the service center is going to be able to do. So, the suggestion was, don't waste any time. If you do, then that car is going to need a $30,000 pack replacement versus a $5,000 to $10,000 repair, which puts it back on the road. But officially, Tesla is unable to recommend any independent or third-party organizations because they accrue some liability when they do so. And believe me, Tesla has a lot of people within the organization on their legal team, and they make sure that none of these breaches occur.
Yes. You know, we would love to have that moniker of being a certified Tesla independent service center. Tesla just doesn't have any certification programs yet.
They do not, no.
And so here's to hoping that at some point in the future they have that certification program, and then we can go through it and get certified.
Yep. George is asking, he says, does anyone know the range of electric cars that were out in the early 1900s before gas vehicles? I think you had some data on
You know,
that.
I have a little bit of data on that, George. These cars typically would run on a lead acid style of battery because it was like the Voltaire battery, and they really typically had somewhere between 30 and 50 miles of range. One of the biggest issues on these batteries is that the recharging capabilities for the lead acid batteries was not very well developed yet. So people tended to get the batteries, run them down, and then throw them away and go get a new battery.
Really? Yeah.
They did not really understand exactly how to recharge a lead acid battery
The
yet.
rechargeable nature was not well communicated, it sounds like.
Yeah, they did not realize or had not developed the technology to be able to do the recharging on those batteries. That's one of the reasons that those cars didn't win the war between EVs and ICE vehicles in the early 1900s.
And you know, part of that story is that in 1909 in New York, the majority of cars on the road were electric, the taxi cabs, for example.
Yes.
And the reason that electric cars were beginning to take over was because they had not yet developed the Bendix automatic starter. And in order to start an ICE vehicle, you had a steel crank that you had to put in the front of the car, and you had to be very careful because if the car backfired on you, there was so much energy that it would break your wrist as it backfired. So that was dangerous. And then they felt that the ladies weren't strong enough to crank the car to start one of these ICE cars.
That's right.
The biggest invention that changed all of that was a company called Bendix, which is still around, by the way. They developed the solenoid-driven Bendix automatic starter, which is nothing more than a lever with a small gear that when you apply voltage to it, the lever comes down. It kicks out with a couple of forks, a small gear that then plows into your drive shaft and couples that DC motor, the starter motor, to the crankshaft to crank over the engine. And once that that innovation and that invention came into prevalence, then electric cars died. It was just more cost effective. And then, of course, Henry Ford had something to do with that.
Oh, absolutely. Henry Ford and his,
$400 car.
$400 car, cars for the masses. You can have any color you want as long as it's black, type of thing. Although I do remember too that it was in the early 1900s that we had the first auto speeding ticket.
Mm-hmm.
And mentioned that a couple weeks back, and it was an electric vehicle, one of those electric taxis, and it was going 12 miles an hour in an 8-mile-an-hour zone.
Is that right?
So yeah, the police officer on a bicycle ran down the car driver and they hauled him off to jail because they didn't have any way to write tickets yet.
Right.
So they spent a night in the slammer for speeding.
Do you know what? I might stand correct, or I think I'm being corrected here. Instagram, Doppelganger58 says, the cathode is negative, the anode is considered positive. Of course, this is first knowledge I learned in radiographic physics. So I have this knowledge is what I base my opinion on, is what he's saying. You know, I could have been wrong all these years, but I'm thinking of a diode. The cathode on a diode is positive, and the anode is negative. For those of you out there, we have an audience here. Please chime in. Give us a perspective on which is positive and which is negative related to cathode and anode on batteries. And we'll wait to hear from you and then disseminate as soon as we get that.
By all means. George also chimed in, and with that package that he's sending us, he says it's lost.
Oh, you're kidding. He says, darn snail mail.
Tracking number says the package is missing. So he's going to check with the post office afterwards. So thank you, George. I'm really looking forward to getting that package.
Yeah. Thank you for the thought. Getting back to Tesla Roadster items here, and I've got a couple more for you. What I have here, and I brought it with me today, this is a circuit board out of a Tesla Roadster. And this is the driver board that sits on top of the power board in the three-phase inverter. And there are three of these, of course, for three phases. This little driver board has a bunch of chips. It has a microprocessor on it and two little transformers. You can see them here and here. As with some of the Roadster parts, they're proprietary. That means that they were made one time and then that was it. And in order to try to recreate is extremely expensive because now we're talking small quantities. Even when Tesla bought this stuff, it was small quantities. 2,400 cars is not enough to attract the big name vendors. And the minimum order quantities were typically very high, even in the early days. And as Tesla admits, vendors wouldn't give them the time of day. They didn't take them very seriously. Many of them wouldn't call them back. It just wasn't a large enough customer for most vendors. So they ended up going with the smaller vendors and then starting the vertical integration program by making some of their own stuff as well. Well, to get back to these transformers, we had a car in our shop about 4 years ago or so. It was a PEM that came out of Sweden. And you would know it was a well-known supercar manufacturer, and I'll leave it at that. Mm-hmm. He had a Roadster, and we fixed the PEM, but one of these transformers was defective. And it's an isolation transformer, custom wound. So we fiddled with it for a while and finally got Tesla to send us one of the parts. And I think this might have been an unofficial contribution, now that I think about it, kind of like one of those things that falls off the back of a truck.
Yeah, okay.
Fortunately, it's exactly what we needed. We were able to put the PEM back together and send that PEM back to Sweden where it belonged to go inside the Roadster. But what I wanted to show you is that there are parts in the Roadster that are extremely hard to get or recreate. I'm proud to say that we actually found a vendor for these transformers and we have a shipment of them coming in. And what typically happens is we only need maybe a dozen of these transformers because not that many fail. But we had to order literally hundreds of them because of the MOQ, the minimum order quantity.
Right.
So if you see our bill and you see that there's a part on there that's much higher than the rest, that's the reason we have to pass on an MOQ, and we can't absorb those costs. But the good news is we have transformers coming back in, and we'll be able to repair those boards.
I've seen in the Gruber Communications space where we manufacture low voltage cables, MOQs that are in the tens of thousands for things that we order. I mean, we've had vendors come to us and say, "Yeah, well, Chinese vendor, we'll manufacture this particular style of cable for you." We had one; it was a particular type of cable that would go into the headset of the people who ran drive-throughs, McDonald's,
Oh, yeah,
Burger King, Jack in the Box, and it was the cable that went from the little battery pack slash transmitter up to the headphones, and the MOQ on that was I think it was 25,000.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to go to the primary distributor who was coordinating through us to get these cables manufactured, and say, "Look, I know you said you only wanted to order, I think it was like 10,000
Yeah,
or
10,000 is better. Okay, yeah.
or 10,000 or something like that." Yeah, it wasn't 10. Because their customer, we don't know who it was, but we know it was a McDonald's or Burger King or
Yeah,
Jack in the
fast
Box
food chain.
level customer. And we said, "Look, if you're going to do this, we have to get a commitment for at least this number of cables."
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up doing that. But that's the example of what the MOQs could be. I could see on little transformers like this, I could see hundreds of them being an MOQ very
Yeah.
easily.
And in all fairness to the vendor that is going to be creating these, I don't think they're on the shelf anywhere. So what they're going to do is they're going to set up machinery, they're going to set up equipment, and all of that setup, the engineering time to go into it, you can see where that cost comes from.
Sure.
And of course, if you can amortize all of those upfront costs across 25,000 of something, then it becomes pennies. If you're ordering 500, it could be $50 per transformer.
Right.
In the comm group, now that you mention it, because of the volume that we do with things like RJ45 cables, you have a connector on either end, and those, tens of thousands of those go out every week. Those, in 100,000, 250,000, 1 million MOQ for that plug is not a problem for us because we know based on the volume that we build that we'll be able to use that, within
Exactly.
a short period of time. But anyway, the good news is the Roadster parts continue to improve. We share a lot of what we do with Tesla, and sometimes Tesla and us handle the MOQ together. They buy some and we buy some, and we're able to meet an MOQ. So that works out well. It's a good partnership.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to do that partnership. I know that we have we've got a partnership with a purchasing partnership that we've trying to put together for shocks on a Roadster as well with Conrad Buck from Mars Orbiter. He's going to buy some shocks and we're going to buy some shocks. And that way together we can go to that vendor and say, yeah, we need, this X number of shocks, and it's a larger quantity than either of us can buy on our own. So that cooperation's helpful.
And then you throw in Tesla, and suddenly you can meet an MOQ.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of questions still. TikTok, Vern. Will Tesla or any EV battery company ever go to a sodium type battery? I heard it's the new type. Yes.
Yeah, we think so too. You were the first one that told us about the sodium battery.
This was a few weeks ago. We broke the story that there is a Chinese car manufacturer their name slips me right now, but I know that they're in partnership with VW, and they are actually have a production car only sold in China that runs on a sodium battery, has about 130 miles worth of range. I've seen, as I've gone down that path of learning more about the sodium ion batteries, There are mixtures of different salts, lithium, sodium, potassium, other magnesium salts that are being tested out in European labs to help both the energy density and range of the batteries. I think that's going to be another step in the future evolution of EV batteries, is to go toward that.
Hmm. We have a good question here. Kent Ernst with a Model S related question. We can squeeze one of those into the Roadster podcast,
Sure.
I guess. Kent joins us from YouTube. Welcome. He says a technical question here. My 2013 Model S85 was working fine during the day. A few hours later, I went to use it, and there were a couple of clicks, and the center screen went dark. Sounds like contactors opening up.
Mm-hmm.
The car would not drive. Tesla says that my original MCU is fine, but it needs a new high voltage battery. I discovered my fuse cover. It is rusted, and it had about 10 cc's of water inside. Tesla does not do a safety recall on the MCU unless I commit to buying a $25,000 battery. Well, the fluid or the water inside the battery is not good news. It's hard to tell how far it's migrated, but whenever you get water intrusion inside a Tesla Model S battery pack, you end up with corrosion. You have an isolation air problem, which the firmware senses. And eventually what happens is, or probably already, is since that water has some minerals in it, you have corrosion on the modules, and you probably have already compromised some of the modules. So their assessment that you need another battery replacement is right on track. We have done some wet Tesla Model S battery repairs, but only when the water has been confined to a particular region in the pack. It always requires pack or a complete module replacement. In an 85, for example, you have 16 modules. And if only one or two of those are wet or compromised, then there is a repair possible. But no one will know that until the car gets transported somewhere to a shop like ours. There's some costs there. Gets put up on a lift. There's a battery pull done. There's costs there. Getting these apart used to be very hard until we had the fine tool show up here.
Yes.
So the 25,000 quoted is for a brand new battery pack from Tesla. They do have reman packs available, and I've heard prices quoted in a $13,000 to $15,000 range for those batteries. But unfortunately, that seems to be your only recourse at this point, is to have Tesla do a little bit more digging and check with them about the reman option for the pack.
Hey, Pete,
Yeah.
if you see yourself in the monitor, can you move your mic just a little to your left? It's blocking your face.
My left or yours? Mine.
Your left.
Okay, that's my right, but that's okay.
Well, I wanted you to move it the other way.
Oh, the other way? All right.
The other left, huh?
There you go.
See how Mark has his? You guys have it toward the middle of the table, kind of still pointing it toward you, though.
Okay.
So that way we don't block the pretty faces.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you, Jesse. And I do recall one time when we had a Model S come in with water ingress in the battery, and went and opened that battery up and found that there was rust all throughout the battery, and because the water ingress was far worse than what we had thought and what the owner had thought.
Right. Like like an ocean-going ship, there are compartments in the battery pack for the modules, but it's not bulletproof. And water in one spot may also mean that water has migrated throughout the pack.
Yeah, and if water gets into the battery pack, it's usually due to some sort of a sealing problem, and the sealing problem, if it's in one part of the pack, there might be a sealant problem or a sealing problem in another area of the pack as well. TikTok political dissident says, when owners pay for a performance boost, what happens to allow that?
Performance boost with what?
Yeah, I mean these questions have been sitting here for a while,
Or-
so it's
yeah.
related to something else. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I don't know if it's been there for a while. I don't remember us talking about a performance boost on any of the cars.
He also has chimed in and has said that cathode is the positive and anode is negative on batteries.
Okay, all right. Well, that's what I had believed all along, but all right.
So, Trucker Alistair has helped chime in on the early electric vehicle. It says in 1902 in Amsterdam, they had electric vehicles for rent or share. They looked at the time like a glass phone booth. Oh, I want to see a picture of that. I'm going to have to take a look.
Yeah, we're gonna have to Google that. And just think if you could find one of those and add to your collection, a glass phone booth electric car from 1902. Man, it's over 100 years old.
Yes, yes.
Oh, Instagram, M Tobin 9220, Tesla stock related. Have you guys commented on Tesla stock price today? You know, I'm an investor. I usually don't check my E-Trade every couple, 3 days or so. Has it gone up substantially today
Yeah,
or
it's,
down?
it's up about 2%, almost to 225.
225. Okay, so it's still climbing. Yeah. And remember, it's volatile. I mean, I always get excited when it goes up too, but then,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, likewise, I do check the stock on a somewhat regular basis as an owner of some Tesla stock. My only comment is it's cool to see. The last time I checked was a few days back, and it was hovering around 200 or just above. So seeing that it's gone up another 10% in the last week or so, that's pretty cool.
It is. We're all waiting for Lucid to go up at this point, right?
Oh
About
yes,
650 or so. Yeah.
and it's and again, I'll qualify this saying I'm a Lucid stockholder.
Right.
This is my opinion, not financial advice. Um, Lucid is 2.5 years into its build up. It took Tesla all the way from 2008 until 2018 before the stock really started to take off.
Good point.
And so I still think those people who get into Lucid are going to be well rewarded if they're patient with the stock.
And finally, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the Saudis seem to be there to prop it up whenever necessary. And do we really think that they're going to get cold feet? It's hard for me to imagine they would invest this much in that car company with that being their second act and pull the plug at some point. Just doesn't make any sense.
Oh, it doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, that same investment fund, I know this is not EV related, but that same investment fund basically paid off PGA Golf. LIV, which is the Saudis'
Right.
invested golf tour, and PGA announced
that's
yesterday
right.
afternoon that they're merging.
Yeah.
And I mean, many of the PGA Tour players are livid. And I think it's more that they're jealous that they didn't take all the
Probably, yeah.
LIV money. But they're very upset about it because it's a negotiated framework and they weren't involved in the negotiations. But I think it comes down to dollars and cents.
Sure.
The Saudi investment fund decided that it's worth throwing a couple $1 billion around to do something like that. If they're going to do something like that for something that really has virtually no chance of making money, why would they not do something in an electric vehicle company that's
Right.
making one of the most beautiful cars on the market, which has one of the best engineered electric motors? Just go watch Sandy Monroe. He'll tell you all about that on the market. They produce more energy out of less mass and space in their Lucid cars than just about any other EV. I just am really bullish on Lucid long term.
So we think they're in there for the long haul.
I do.
Looks like Scott Gruber, a great last name, by the way, YouTube viewer, been with us before. He's asking, hello, do you think the electric motors mounted in the wheel will be the day of the future electric cars? Will they be built this way in the future, in other words? By the way, my father worked for Bendix. Well, congratulations. Yeah, that great company. We have a video out on YouTube where we discuss the wheel well motors, in-wheel motors, in other words. And of course, there are already manufacturers that are using those, Aptera, Solo, for example, Electromechanica. There are some design challenges, unsprung weight issues, for example. But there are enough EV manufacturers that are beginning to lean in that direction. And is it the way of the future? Well, don't know. Time will tell.
Time will tell, but if you remember, Lamborghini has their
right.
EV supercar concept that is absolutely gorgeous, and it also has electric
In-wheel
motors
motors.
in wheel.
That was a car that was developed with MIT in conjunction with MIT. bunch of engineers and futuristic thinking guys. But as Lamborghini said, don't look for this becoming a mainstream car. This is a prototype. This is a
Right.
concept car.
Right. In fact, I think they had gone so far as to say their best case would be that sometime in the early 2030s, maybe they'll build like 63 of them since Lamborghini started in 1963.
Well, the guys have advised me that I should do more rants. I'm not going to do one in this session, but one of the, it's easy to pick some topics if you
Oh,
want to
yeah.
rant in the EV space. And a couple of them are going to be immediately Lamborghini building a hybrid. That's going to be a great rant for me. And then, Corvette following, the same lead. Those are going to be fun ones. But on our YouTube channel, it'll be called Pete's Rants, and I'm going to do what Sandy Munro does, which is pick a topic and just express some opinions about it, and what I feel passionate about and what I feel strongly about.
Absolutely. Okay. George has a great question, and it's not about the sunglasses.
Okay.
He says, I know everyone asks about the sunglasses. He says, but why are you guys wearing headphones when all of you are in the same room?
It's kind of like wearing masks in your car by yourself during COVID. Guys, why do we wear headsets? Oh, he's got to think about this. Maybe we didn't need to wear them all along. Come on, Jesse.
No, this is going to be a part of our sunglass video. It'll be coming out soon.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. All right. I stand
We
corrected.
can't give all the secrets away,
All right. So this is going to be a well-kept secret. Getting back to Roadster stuff. This is a Roadster podcast, after all.
Yeah, that's true.
What I'm holding up here is a decal. And if we can throw up an image, Jesse, it's called Before 3B. I don't know where that name came from, but in a Tesla Roadster, there are two versions. There's the 1.5, which has a stick shift. And that's a holdover from the days when they had a transmission in the Tesla Roadster and found out that they were burning them all up. It was a Borg Warner tranny, but the torque in the car just killed the clutches. So after VIN 500, they went to a push button, brindle, basically function. And what happens is these are like elevator buttons. With use, they get worn out. And here you can see a classic example of some worn out brindle buttons. Now, brindle implies there's an L in there somewhere, which is low. And the Tesla Roadster doesn't have that. But rather than say prind, we say prindle.
Okay.
And I'm trying to peel this open so that you guys can see the buttons. What we have on our e-store is a recreation of these buttons. And when yours look this bad, you know what, I can't get this open, but if you can visualize, and you can probably see it, there are 4 buttons here. And by purchasing this on our e-store, you can actually overlay that on the existing buttons. And since this is the same size, same color, and same the letter relief, this will actually fix that problem and make it look like new again. So there you have it. There's another Tesla Roadster tip for this show.
And we had, I know you had somebody come to you recently as well about the open vehicle management system, and had the question of, I'm going to be leaving for a while. What do I need to do to make sure that my Roadster stays safe?
And this was a Texas customer. And the question typically is, I'm going to be gone for 3 months or whatever. And what do I do to make sure that my Roadster doesn't get bricked? Well, the first recommendation we have these days is get yourself an OVMS system, Open Vehicle Management System. We had the team leaders, or the originator of this product. We had the team leader, Mark Webb Johnson, on our podcast about 3 weeks ago or so. And what this is it's a black box that mounts up underneath the passenger compartment in a Roadster, ties into the vehicle management system module, and it now gives you, or reestablishes a connection to the Roadster through your cell phone. And 4G now, since it's been updated. And what this will do for you is tell you exactly what's going on with your Roadster, what the charge levels are. You can set alerts, for example. Is the coolant level correct? What is the charge level in case a thunderstorm rolls through and you lose power? All of that will be available to you so you can proactively advise someone to go to your house and reset the circuit breaker,
Right.
or restart the car. So this has saved this little box. It's about $400 or so. Has saved more brick roadsters than anything else I can think of. So that was the first suggestion. He then said, "Well, I've got one of those, but I never got it programmed." So contact us. We'll help you get it programmed. We'll set it up for you. You guys do that actually.
Yeah, yeah. One of the guys on my IT team actually is uh, an expert in setting this up. I know that even we had somebody here locally in the Phoenix metro area was about to take off and they were having problems with the setup of it. Went out to his house, helped make sure that it was connected to the Wi-Fi and connected to his phone, and so it's something that we're happy to be able to do for people.
And that's customer service at its finest.
Absolutely.
So the things to consider here is Tesla has 3 different charge modes. They have the storage mode. They have the 120-volt cable, which is the yellow cable that came with the Roadster. It's a slow charge. It takes about 35 hours or so to get a full charge from that cable, but it's a good slow charge. And then you've got your UMC cable, which is the 240-volt charge cable plug, which goes into a straight blade 6-50 dryer type plug. What we recommend for keeping your Roadster in storage, and I'm going to carefully use that term because you don't want to use storage charge. I'll tell you in a second. Use that yellow charge cable when you're storing your Roadster. Leave it plugged in at all times. The car will decide when it needs a charge or not, and the OVMS will tell you if it's unable to get a charge. The reason you don't want to use storage mode is this was a provision that Tesla built into the charging methods for the Roadster, is that it only charges to like 25% or so. And theoretically, it's supposed to keep the battery in better health. What actually ends up happening with storage mode is when you have a problem, the distance from state of charge at 25% to 0 is very brief, very short. You didn't start at 170 miles charge, for example. So it's a dangerous way to go. We recommend just use the yellow charge cable, leave it plugged in at all times, and make sure that you have a monitoring device or have someone keeping an eye on the car while you're gone.
Well, that standard charge, if I remember right, on a Roadster is somewhere around 80% or 85% of a full charge.
Exactly.
And when the Roadsters were first developed and put on the marketplace back in 2008 to 2010, there were no competition, competitive other models of cars. The 80-20 rule for electric batteries didn't exist because nobody knew about it. So Tesla was doing what they thought was safe, and at the time, only to learn later that actually it's much safer to leave your car at an 80% charge than it is to leave it at a 20%.
Exactly. So that was our recommendation to that customer, and I'm not sure where he's going, but he's going to be leaving Texas and going somewhere for a few months. Log files.
Yes.
We get a lot of questions how to do log files, and we have a newsletter, and we refer people to that out on our website. There are a number of newsletters out there, by the way, probably 30 of them these days. One of them deals with how to extract a log file from your Roadster. The time that you do that is if you're buying a Roadster, ask for a log file from the seller. What the log file will tell us is, are there any brewing issues that aren't showing up on the vehicle display screen yet? This is cheap insurance because it gives you early warning whether there are any issues. And sometimes it's a surprise both to the seller and the potential buyer that, yeah, there is something brewing. And if there's a problem with the car, what the log file does is it gives us a deep dive under the hood to see what's going on before we pull the trigger and say, okay, car needs to be transported here. Maybe you can take it to a Tesla service center. Maybe it's something that you can even resolve. So it's cheap insurance again. And sometimes people ask us to do log files for them just because they want to see if there are any brewing issues. And it's all free, by the way. So if you have, or if you're interested in getting a log file for your Roadster, feel free to email it to us at ev@gruber.com. And the way to extract it, go to our website, look under newsletters, how to extract the log file, and we'd be more than happy to give you a deep dive look into what's going on with your car.
By all means. And, my background, I've told you guys before, my background is not so much engineering as it is technology and finance. Well, since it's technology, I do have a tip for you when it comes to getting that USB stick. The 4 gigabyte USB stick that Tesla Roadsters came with, or that Tesla Roadsters require as a maximum size, by the way, not the minimum size, is becoming increasingly hard to find.
Yeah.
The 8 gig is kind of the new low end, and that's starting to phase out. And the 16 gig stick is kind of the new standard as the minimum level. And you go up all the way to, I think I saw somebody with a 2 terabyte stick. It is possible to convert these larger capacity sticks in a format that the Roadster can read. And what I'll do, Pete, for our users and for us on the Roadster site, on Gruber Motor site, I'll put together some instructions with screenshots so that people can know how to reformat their disk, their USB stick. It's a 3-step process. For those of you that are technical, it's not that hard. Windows computers have a partition manager. You plug your stick into your computer. You then go into that partition manager, and you will see the USB stick as one of your hard drives. And you delete the partition that's there and then recreate a 4 gigabyte partition. That makes the partition size no bigger than what the Roadster can handle. You can go smaller. You can go 2 gigabytes. You can even go to 1 gigabyte, not a problem. But the key is go to the partition manager, delete the partition that's there, and recreate a new, smaller partition. Then, still in the partition manager, you would do a format using the FAT32 file system. Windows, the normal file system for Windows is NTFS, is what it's called, and that's the Windows NT file system. And the FAT file system, file allocation table, 32 is the 32-bit. So if you put your format into a FAT32 type of file system and you make your partition 4 gigabytes or less, it no longer matters what size of memory stick you have. The Roadster can read it.
And we have to be very specific about this. The Roadster will choke on anything larger than 4 gig.
Yes, it will.
It will not process. We've had people try to fool it, but Mark's procedure does work. So
yes, we've tested this. We actually took and sent an 8 gig stick to somebody in Las Vegas because they were having problems. They were not technically savvy enough to be able to do this reformat process. Not a lot of people will really know how to do it. And they were able to plug our stick in, get the log file, send it back to us. Not a problem.
Hey guys, we are at 1 hour and 17 minutes. If you want to get these questions, we'll wrap up.
Sure. We've got YouTube, Lightning Rod. Welcome back. He says the glasses activate the headphones. Aha. And the glasses activate the secret channel feed that is required to initialize the headphones. Lightning Rod, you're usually right about these things. You're, I think, one of the first ones that suggested there might be a double green screen here. And what everyone else sees, of course, is this beautiful Roadster and sand dunes. But those with the right sunglasses are able to see beyond that.
Absolutely, they are. TikTok DVE37 says hub-mounted motors. That sounds like easy-to-steal motors.
Wow, I hadn't thought of that.
Hadn't thought of that, but I think that's a good point. That
they steal wheels, they steal tires. Why not the whole motor?
I think it would not be that hard. Lift your car up on jacks and they yank the wheel off, and depending on how that motor is mounted, they could have that motor off of there in a couple of minutes.
Amazing. YouTube, Crunch to Grace Hopper, welcome back. He says, number 9, catching up from way back. Hit that thumb.
Thanks, Crunch. Glad to have you back. YouTube, George from the Watch Rich Rebuilds channel. He said, I did mine myself on my 2014 Model S MCU, but there is an LTE board upgrade from the 3G, or is there an LTE board upgrade from the 3G board for Roadsters? So he says he did the 3G to 4G upgrade because the 2014 Model S was still the older 3G. Is there a 3G board for Roadsters? Actually, Roadsters had 2G cell
originally.
service.
Yes.
Originally.
Yep. And yeah, those are now defunct. They're on a VMS board, I believe. And what the old VMS system does is it converts, or it now activates 4G for the Roadster.
Yeah, I do not believe, based on our conversations with Mark Webb Johnson in the past, that there is an upgrade path on the Roadster to get from 2G to 4G, or even 2G to 3G for that matter.
Right.
I think it requires that OVMS board, because the OVMS board has its own cellular modem in it, and it's a 4G modem.
There's another compelling reason aside from being able to link up to your Roadster if you're on a vacation or whatever, or you want telemetry from the car at any point in time. A service organization like us also benefits from that link. It may save you from having to send the car to us because we're able to do some diagnosis through that OVMS system.
That is correct. George, again, comment to Lightning Rod. He says, Lightning Rod, I think the sunglasses are them hiding the fact that they're really aliens, like Elon from the future, and are here to teach the world about EV technology. Kind of reminds me of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure a little bit.
That theory has been floated before, and it is possible. Until that video comes out, our audience just won't know. Our viewers won't know for sure. Dean Bortz has a good question from YouTube. He said that we mentioned thunderstorms. So, has anyone ever had damage to their Tesla from a lightning strike? The first thing that comes to mind there is lightning, of course, is millions of volts of electricity. A car is pretty well insulated from ground because of the tires. Now, granted, you may have a wet wheel, there's some water there, but certainly not enough conductivity to throw hundreds or thousands of amps, which, lightning is definitely capable of. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. But then, of course, you have to consider that lightning has traveled a mile or two to get to Earth. So jumping another 6 inches or so to ground really isn't that much of a feat for it. The basic answer to that is I have never heard of a Roadster owner having a Roadster that was struck with lightning or any of the ramifications from that. And I'm sure that if that was the case, that would become a legend.
I think it would, and I'm actually on my computer here looking up. I'm going to keep this up. There's a couple of videos on YouTube of Teslas that have been struck by lightning. So that's going to be an interesting one. Crunch on YouTube has another question for us. It says, while you're still live, can you please compare Tesla's native battery test in the hidden service menu versus the much more informative one in the Tesla app? Thanks in advance.
A comparison. You guys use that more than I do.
I know that there's a battery test in the Tesla app. Crunch, I think I'm going to have to get back with you on this one, though, and do a little bit of research, because I know what the native battery test in the hidden service menu is. That's more of a Model 3, Model Y thing, and it takes anywhere, usually about 24 hours. You start it, it will completely drain the battery and then completely recharge the battery. They tell you that it needs about 24 hours. You have to be plugged into a level 2 charger, and your battery needs to start at less than 50% charge.
Okay.
Don't know much about the one from the app, though.
Okay.
I do know that the one that's in the hidden service menu is more something that really is designed for the service centers and not for the end users to use. For the end user, basically all you see is the battery healthy or is it not? And it might come back with an updated CAC value. I'll find out what's going on with the Tesla app, though.
Okay. Instagram, Mike Fruin. He says, gents, any timing on Model 2 release? Will this fuel stock price? Well, if you're interested in the Model 2 release, we posted something humorously on Facebook about 2 weeks ago or so, with all of this talk about the Model 2 and Tesla continuously teasing everyone with a black silhouette with a kind of an outline of a Model 2 vehicle. Or they're not even calling it a Model 2, if you remember. The next generation
It's
car.
just the next generation, yeah.
So I thought, you know what? With all this intrigue, let me ask AI and see what it knows. And it rendered an image. I don't know if Jesse can pull it up, but
Which was that this week? I'm trying to find the show
it
folder.
It's
it was last week,
from,
I
I think,
think.
last week or even the week before.
Yeah.
But it was a remarkable image of a Tesla potential Model 2.
And of all of the images we have ever posted on social media, Facebook, for example, this was the by far the most popular image. One of the sites alone had almost 200 likes,
Yeah.
which is, unheard of on Facebook, at least for us. But it did a very good rendition of taking that existing silhouette that they keep teasing us with.
I got it.
You got it. And a black, there you go.
Yeah, and so his further question is one that I think we can answer more tomorrow. Of
Mhm.
oh, do you think it'll fuel the stock price? I've got some opinions on that one too, but I think in the spirit of brevity on this particular show, we're gonna do this again tomorrow. Now, Farzad Misbahi is going to be here as our guest, but we'll try to get to some of these questions that we're researching as well.
And by the way, for those of you that are unfamiliar with Farzad, Farzad is an up and coming influencer on YouTube, very knowledgeable, ex Tesla, by the way. And he's going to be joining us in a Zoom call tomorrow for our general EV podcast. I think it's one that you'll find interesting, and bring your questions to that session as well. We appreciate everyone joining us. We've had Instagram, Twitter, I think, Facebook, LinkedIn,
TikTok,
YouTube.
YouTube, of course, YouTube.
Mhm.
We do have just two more quick ones, but we're going to mostly refer these to tomorrow as we close up. Mihar Bitani from TikTok. Hope that you can watch us tomorrow as well. We can try to delve into the answer of how long does a Tesla Model Y last?
Mhm.
Yeah. Also, the guy who asked about that Model 2 that we just showed the AI image,
Mhm.
he's on Instagram, so he actually can't see that. So
Oh,
for that
okay.
person, you should be able to hear me. If you want to go to watch the podcast after on YouTube, you'll be able to see that image. That was Mike over on Instagram. And then also, real quick, just on TikTok, we had Pluto and Kyle. They both became followers and shared our stream. So we appreciate that, you guys out there on TikTok.
Very much so. And by the way,
Yes.
everyone that saw this AI rendering of the potential Model 2, their overwhelming response was, if that's what it's going to look like, I'm in. So it looks like it's a big hit, at least.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was a beautiful picture. George has come back to us. Thank you guys for a great show, and congratulations to Rich with the new baby.
Richard with the new baby, yes. And he's on paternity leave right now, but I'm sure he's enjoying his new daughter.
Yeah, he was messaging me during the show. He wants to come get his computer so he can work from home. So he might be helping us out next week.
I knew he was going to be bored.
Ah,
Yeah,
fantastic.
I knew that was the next stage. Well, again, thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate you being in the audience and supporting us. We will have the EV show tomorrow. This was the Roadster podcast show. Again, any of you Roadster owners, thank you for joining us. And anything that you want to watch afterwards, we date and timestamp these things, and they go live on our, or they go, they're stored on our YouTube channel under the live category. So you can see the whole show again, or just see portions that you want to view.
I know that we also take these podcasts and move them up to Spotify. So if you're ever on Spotify and want to listen to the Gruber Morning Show, you can listen to that. Are the Gruber Roadster Roundtable podcasts put under the Gruber Morning Show as well, Jesse?
Not on Spotify. That's its own thing that we're still building out. And then we'll also be building out Gruber Power over there too.
Okay.
Okay.
So, yeah, listen to us. Thank you guys for your support. You're the ones that make this happen. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.